Welcome to the quintessential listening poetry online radio and YouTube podcast, streamed live from the heart of Washington, D.C. Here, you'll find a portal to vibrant voices, echoing souls, and an ongoing celebration of the extraordinary power of language. So, prepare yourself to join host Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram and his special guests as they explore traditional and spoken word forms of poetry.
My guest on a recent podcast episode was the multi-talented poet B. Allen. B is an African-Italian performance poet based in Oakland, California. He has been active in creative writing and spoken word since the early 1990s. He has authored 9 books, including Boneyard and Skeletal Black, published by QLPORYT Press, Rusty Gallows, Passages Against Hate, published by Vagabond Books, Crimson Stain, published by EYEPUBLISHEWE, and his latest, Discovery, published by Southern Arizona Press. This is in addition to 73 anthological appearances published over his literary career. In addition to his amazing poetry, I enjoy the interview because it was powerful, provocative, and timely. So I invite you to join me as I spend time with D. Allen.
Let's begin this poetic journey. D, what is poetry?
Thank you for having me, Dr. Ingram. Never mind Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of poetry. Here's what it means to me. Poetry is a written attempt to make sense out of an increasingly insane reality. Poetry is also a written attempt to try to find beauty in our everyday reality.
Share that definition one more time for me, please.
Poetry is a written attempt to make sense out of an increasingly insane reality. Poetry is also a written attempt to find beauty in our everyday reality.
An insane reality. Tell me more about that part of the definition.
We're in the middle of an election year.
Yes.
Every 4 years in the continental United States, we have an election year. And like every other election year before it, it's a dog and pony show between the 2 top contenders of the 2 top capitalist political parties. But it seems like every pretender to the throne seems to do something or say something outrageous just to make the situation or the things they're pledging to solve once they take office a lot worse than it is. On top of that, the earth seems to be warming more and more with each passing year. No thanks to this human-created disaster known as the greenhouse effect. It's an old school expression for global climate change. How the polar ice caps are slowly melting and melting, leading to higher water levels of the oceans and rivers. Mm-hmm. Droughts, spontaneous wildfires, you name it, it's happening all throughout nature right now.
Yes.
And don't see it as nature dying or vanishing. The earth's being killed. The earth is being killed by our insistence to keep on using fossil fuels. To keep using fossil fuels to fuel up our vehicles, to power up factories, dirty energies like gasoline or coal.
So poetry,
piece it together in the best words that I can on paper, which will help me and possibly potential readers to process through all this.
That's very nice, D. You know, there are people out there who believe that poetry is dying, that it's no longer what it once was.
That it's no longer relevant.
My question to you is poetry still important?
To me, yes. It's important to put my standpoint out into the world through writing poems because it's just as valid as anyone else's viewpoint. And no one will respect me if I don't.
All right. Please share with me an early experience where you learned that poetic language has power.
Ooh, that one is very easy for me to answer. The first time I've experienced or known that poetry has power to it, the language of poetry, when I did my very first live spoken word performance at a friend's birthday party. It was held one evening at a house where a punk band lived and practiced, December 1992. My two musician friends, one black heavy metal guitarist, one brown, long-haired punk bassist, both male, talked me into it while I was writing a 3-page poem over a coffee table at this house party. Once I finished writing the poem, my two buds both wanted me to perform the poem into a mic on a stand, plugged into a bass guitar amp. And reluctantly, I picked up the mic, stood in front of everybody, and did the do, and afterwards, I got an applause. Clapping, hooting, and hollering all around. I wasn't expecting that at all. Mm-hmm. And I did that opening up for a hard-edged, female-led alternative band. That's when I discovered the power of poetic language, outside of reading poetry books, that is.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. There's so much in that story. I'll invite you back so you can flesh that out. That's beautiful.
In fact, one of the poems in my newest book happens to explain that particular experience. Right. It's called Cinder Block Wall.
And again, your newest book is Discovery.
Yeah, Discovery.
Very nice. So good people out there, Discovery is the title of Dee Allen's latest work. So Dee, what do you write about? I've heard you speak. I've listened to your work. You cover a lot of different things, but share more. What do you write about?
Racism, poverty, and the environment. The three things that I pretty much know something about and have lived through. I also write the occasional miscellaneous poem where the inspiration can come from anything, anyone, anywhere.
All right. Dee, please share a poem.
And the first poem happens to come from Discovery. It's the title poem, Discovery, in its entirety, pages 12 through 16. Discovery. There be no Dita Von Teese, no Princess Farhana, no Julie Strain, no Suicide Girls, no Coco Electric, no paintings by Olivia. Debbie Mazar, Renee Zellweger, Gemma Arterton, millions of goth females worldwide would have never played dress-up without the one discovery of two black men, virtually unknown, totally unsung. Leading musicians into battle with bebop jazz notes wasn't enough for Cass Carr. The Jamaican bass player led another phalanx of men, hitting beachheads like Hell's Kitchen, Harlem, upstate New York, pastures, kept his other weapon of choice at hand, took advantage of each and every precious shot. A beautiful rainbow crafted from each photo, Puerto Rican, African, Caucasian glamour models, cheesecakes, and nudes. Of the fairer side of Carr's pictorial rainbow, only one stood out as exceptional. Coal black hair framed her smiling face. Light blue sapphires posed his eyes. The perfect hourglass figure, pale as moon glow. All the curves in all the right places. The finest woman ever to cross his flashing camera sight. With her homemade nightwear on, or bikinis, or without, She felt no shame in her game. Audacious Tennessee rose, born to strike a pose. Handcuffs were slapped on the wrist of Carr and 22 from his camera club when police raided a farm. Nude photography, harmless act, a crime anywhere in Truman's USA. Carr's discovery, also arrested and charged. Indecent exposure, she resisted. Posing was fun, she resisted. The judge gave her what she gave the entire courtroom, disorderly conduct. Word on the scandal found its way in whispers, hearsay, loose talk. Thereafter, the model, her sweet name, her sultry image were given underground notoriety. Patrolling the street on the Brooklyn beat wasn't enough for Jerry Tibbs. The married NYPD officer on some days would shed his dark blue uniform and wore the sable one he was born with. Just a man enjoying his spare time. His busy hands worked the camera. On Coney Island's white sandy beach, he found her, a southern transplant curious about her new northern home. His eyes saw a model in her straight away. His clicking Kodak gate truly loved her from the start. Stance per stance, pick per pick, Tibbs' work seemed ready to be shown. Then again, he thought, something had to be done about his subject's already movie star looks. Tibbs already talked her into wearing shortcut bangs with her long ebony hair. Cass Carr took her picture again and again, and they sold well in Manhattan nightclubs. And the shutterbugs and the barflies, they knew why. The pale, playful lady many have seen, cracking a whip like a dom, tied with rope like a sub, taking a bubble bath in vibrant color, dancing seductively with her partner, a stuffed clown doll in grainy black and white, happily splashing in water on Miami Beach shore, gracing men's magazine covers, dressed in a leopard print skirt or her famous black lingerie and nylons. Men back then wanted to date her. Women right now want to emulate her, Betty Page. Queen of Curves would have never lived that title without being guided in the right direction by two black men. Virtually unknown, totally unsung. They found a rare Southern girl and made her the center of attention. Discovery. And that was the title poem of my new and 9th book, Discovery, now available from Southern Arizona Press.
Wow, that poem was quite epic.
That's what I was going for.
Yes, that's exactly what you achieved.
Story also happens to be one of the lesser told stories of American Black history. This woman right here would have never gotten where she was as a model and an actress without being steered in the right direction by two Black photographers in New York City, Jerry Tibbs and then Cass Carr.
Share with me some of the lines in that poem that you're most proud of writing, and then maybe a couple of lines that you felt challenged to write.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite one. In this particular stanza, I thought regular people, they don't have to read poetry, could identify with. She felt no shame in her game. Audacious Tennessee rose, born to strike a pose. So that tells me right there that everything that Betty Page did in the early 1950s was ahead of her time. I was also proud of this other line. Patrolling the street on the Brooklyn beat wasn't enough for Jerry Tibbs. And leading musicians into battle with bebop jazz notes wasn't enough for Cass Carr. So even though they have all these day jobs and crap, They were photographers in their spare time. And I think that's where their greatest fame was.
Any lines that challenged you as you thought about writing them and including them?
Ooh, this one right here. Handcuffs were slapped on the wrist of Carr and 22 from his camera club when police raided a farm. Nude photography, harmless act, a crime anywhere in Truman's USA. And I really had to think hard about how I wanted to phrase that particular instance in both Cass Carr and Betty Page's life.
Tell me why. Tell me more about that. Fascinating.
It was hard to put the words down on paper. I knew as I was doing the research what I was about to write about, but putting them into words was difficult. And I just went in that moment in straight reportage, except for that last line. A crime anywhere, nude photography, a crime anywhere in Truman's USA, because this is the early 1950s, mind you, and anything that challenged the status quo or America in the suburbs was considered subversive and bad, or to go even deeper or more further than that would smack of communist influences.
All great writers, D, have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
Oh, that's a big question, but I'm going to answer it to the best of my ability. Yes. Among them was Langston Hughes, the late great shining star of the early 20th century Harlem Renaissance. And I love the fact that he's versatile, that he didn't just write about one thing, and he didn't just write in only one emotional state or mood. Some pieces of his are funny, some of his come across as straight reportage, some of them he went deep into his darkest feelings, and some of them he writes about family. He even wrote poems for children. Mm-hmm. And some of them were political. So I like the way that he was able to write about more than just one thing and create this mulligan stew of different moods and states of mind that he would write in. Mm-hmm. I've kind of incorporated that into my own work. Mm-hmm. And there's also Dr. Sonia Sanchez. Do you know her?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, very emotionally powerful, but also scholarly at the same time, especially when she speaks about the Black experience in America. And I also like Robert Hayden because he's eloquent in his use of the English language. And he was able to do it without bringing in what is now called today African-American vernacular English or Ebonics. Yes. He didn't have to use slang terms or Ebonics to get his point across. And he was able to reach out to Black readers and readers of other races. Mm-hmm. And I want to do that with my own work as well. So Hayden gets big props for that. And then there's also Mary Baraka, Hakiyar Matabuti, because they were the shining stars of the 1970s Black arts movement. They acted as voices of our people in those years in the realm of literature. And I wanted to do that as well.
They say that to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to poets, comedians, musicians, and other artists. So for you, what emerges from your writing that's truly D. Allen? Talk to me.
My love for music, my love for art, my love for others' literature, and traveling to different places outside of my current hometown or my home state or whatever. And I'm able to engage with current events to try to speak my piece about what's happening in the world today, basically.
Please share another poem.
Okay. This next poem also happens to be a glimpse into the life of another powerful lady. This one happens to be someone who lives in my current home city of Oakland, California, and a fellow activist. From pages 40 and 42 in Discovery, based on actual people and places. This is called Driver Plaza. This neighborhood comes together to serve the community, long-time community, form bonds among themselves, feed the people, North Oakland people, free homemade and donated food on bowls and plates, free rides to the hospital, free legal advice teaching the Po about rights they never knew they had, useful when confronting cops, courts, and landlords, free tips on getting the homeless housed at last, installing a bench to sit on, a hard plastic outhouse for self-relief, a cob oven for cookouts, planted collard greens and fruit trees for neighbors who join the ancestors. Survival is ensured, dignity is restored every Tuesday afternoon at 61st and Adeline, Driver Plaza. This neighborhood is coming together to stop gentrification from stealing food, community, human rights, Black homes, and Auntie from them. Extended family member, their Auntie Frances, with Berkeley in her bloodstream. She who holds her hood in her affectionate arms. She who walks liberation despite poverty and 90-day threats on paper. Her revolutionary acts of cooking for the Black. Her perennial love mission, Black Panther vision, won't be evicted if more neighbors stand behind her and valiantly fight, keeping her indoors. The outside world has jaws agape, hungry for bodies, unhoused by evictions. Born, bred, Oakland grown. Auntie needs her triplex apartment, home of 8 years. Living and resting aren't all she needs it from. Her kitchen, especially, besides the plaza, is the centerpiece of her life, crucial in keeping her humanitarian vision and folks fed and alive in a city undergoing rapid change at 61st and Adeline, Driver Plaza. No family should be strong. No family could be strong without their aunties in guidance. Driver Plaza for Auntie Frances Mo.
Tell me more about the purpose of that poem, D. Finish it out. Yes.
The purpose of the poem Driver Plaza was to draw attention to the fact that this community activist in North Oakland, South Berkeley area was about to be evicted from her house of 8 years, a house that she has lived in that neighborhood. And if she was to be forced out of it, she wouldn't be able to cook for the Black the way she does. She wouldn't be able to reach out to the people and keep them from being evicted, letting them know what their rights are under the local laws of Berkeley and Oakland, and to just come together as a community of working class and poverty class people. Because the Po and the workers definitely need that love too, and a good meal.
Please share another poem.
All right. And before I go into that, this is Auntie Frances Mo. And this is her doing exactly what she does best, feeding the block of the North Oakland, South Berkeley area, as she has done since 2009 with her self-help hunger program.
All right. Wonderful.
And this next poem is going to go in a more personal direction. And I spoke to you much earlier before we went on air about my living in San Francisco and how I'm no longer a resident of that particular Northern California city. This next poem happens to speak to that. From Discovery, from pages 56 and 57 in the book. This is called To an Apparition. How could you forsake the affection I gave to you? How could you forsake the affection you'd given back? How could you forget the affection we'd mutually felt? Aren't artists and writers good enough for you anymore? Are the strange ones scaring you that much? Why did you detest Black people so suddenly? Do you detest me so fiercely, so actively? Was it the fact that I lived in the Mission District and not Pacific Heights? Was it me having less money? Was it the wealthy, bearded, white tech dude you fancied more than the struggling young Black writer who stood loyally in your corner? Are you still hella salty at me? Are you even a bit surprised that I detest you for pushing me out, for not wanting to be near you now? San Francisco? To an Apparition.
That was quite a twist at the end. I like
that twist had to be there.
Yeah,
I no longer feel any love for a city that would forcibly push me out the way it did back in January of 2015. I was evicted from a 3-floor walk-up building that served as both an anarchist social center and a collective house. Mm-hmm. I lived in that place for about 5 years. And then the landlord decided in the last year that I lived there that they want to sell the building. They want to jump on the gentrification bandwagon and make whatever money they could, selling the entire building that anarchist social center / collective house was in to another buyer, somebody equally rich.
Listening to that particular poem and your other pieces, it makes me wonder, does it hurt you at times to write poetry? If not, why not?
Yes, it does. Pertaining to current events that's happening in the world and at any given time, especially when it resonates with me personally, yeah, it hurts. Especially that last poem, To an Apparition, that hurt me deeply because in the past, I used to actively fight against gentrification when it was happening to somebody else. When someone else was being evicted from their home, their family was being threatened to be put out on the curb, them and their possessions. But then when it started happening to me, nobody came to my rescue. And I started feeling like a victim. For that last year at Station 40, and that was the name of the anarchist social center / collective house I was living in on 16th and Mission in San Francisco, I felt like a victim. No one came to my rescue. No one came to save me from an eviction. But it happened to me. And that's why I'm currently living in Oakland, California. I came here out of desperation.
I understand. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
And I had to let San Francisco know exactly how I felt about her.
Right.
It took the form of a game of 20 questions. Mm-hmm. The form that I took the poem in. It was just questions that needed answering. Why did you kick me out?
Very powerful question. Are you willing to be hurt by the poetry of others? If not, why not?
Oh, yeah. I have many haters, let me tell you. I've had more haters in the past 3 decades I've been doing this than I have fans. And a lot of it has to do with the controversial content that I use for some of my poems and song lyrics. It may rub some people on the other side the wrong way, and they feel the need to lash out against me. And I even have some of these haters in the form of other poets. I kid you not. And a lot of them don't like the fact that I'm standing up for mine, that I'm basically putting it out there, that I'm basically saying how I feel about this such and such thing, and that such and such event.
So when you read the works of others and they share their lived experiences and their stories could be very tragic, do you feel hurt when you read those stories on top of what you just said?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially when a poet decides to come to like a live event or even an online open mic and start to open up with a poem with some serious, deeply personal content, which could be about a sexual assault that person has suffered in their childhood, or feeling abandoned by their own parents, or having survived some accident that could have killed them otherwise. And hearing that hurts me.
Why, D?
I try to put myself in their shoes and try to imagine what it would be like if I lost a parent or felt like I was abandoned by both parents. I, from a personal standpoint, have been raised not by my mother, but by my aunt and uncle, and my grandmother helped out. Because at the time my mother had me, she was a teenager. She had 4 children, and I was the third one of them. And she was not ready to be a mother, nor does she want to be a mother. But as the years and decades passed by, she came to accept her 4 children, myself included. And I put out all these books of mine and made appearances in up to 73 anthologies. And my mother is immensely proud of me for doing this.
I'm sure.
My other family members are too.
I'm not surprised. So when you begin a poem, does it begin with an idea, a feeling, a form, or an image?
All the above at different times. It depends on the piece itself. Sometimes it'll be just an idea. Other times it'll be something that I've already have lived through and struggling to find the words to say. Other times it will be about culture. It'll be about the last movie I saw, the last song I've listened to, a person from history that I admire, or even a person from culture I admire. This entire book right here was about a person I admired, but I wanted to delve deeper into their life and did years of research on Betty Page, even the times before she became this highly popular model and actress in the 1950s.
When you write, my friend, do you sit and think through every word of every stanza, or do you write freely and allow the words to flow?
It depends. It depends on what my process is at that particular moment. Sometimes I'll sit down and I'll try to think the words through as well as the feelings or the image. And I'll picture something in my head and I'll translate it on paper, because that's where my process starts first. I start on paper, then I'll write a copy of that same finished piece on a computer. Sometimes I'll do it in one sitting. Other times I'll write that one particular poem or song in pieces over a course of days until I have a final formulated piece. Something that at least looks and reads coherent on paper.
Okay. Please share the 2 poems for us.
2 poems.
Yes.
Okay, here's another poem, and both of these are like connected to one another. From page 81 of Discovery, This one is called Soul Memory. My soul remembers the rejection from public life my ancestors must have felt in the distant past, the bugaboo status they've known, and the new incoming migrants, border patrol or none, border wall or none, know now. Back then, all laundries, dry cleaners, nightclubs, hotels, bars, restaurants, hospitals, clinics, schools, libraries, grocery stores, clothing shops, homes, bank loans, jobs, barbers, boneyards were open and available for everyone's use, unless you were Black. Soul Memory. And here's the much longer poem connected to it. In fact, it's the sequel. Soul Memory 2. My soul remembers. Discrimination barred from entering society's doors. Initially open, hastily shut when they saw Black faces coming. My soul also remembers how my ancestors fought to throw those doors open wide to them. The separate and but separate but equal was sought to be dropped so everybody's equal. So they sang, marched, picketed, protested, sat in, risked arrest, filled jail cells to capacity, endured spit, slaps, sharpened slurs, high-powered water hoses, dog bites, middle finger salutes, Confederate flags on sticks, noxious tear gas, thrown bricks, walked their way to freedom from living as second class, taking non-violent steps, letting nothing and nobody turn around the mass exodus. Nowhere to go but ahead. Yes, boss, were words they wanted extracted from their vocabulary. Beneath dusty boots of bigots were the places they wanted to leave. Someone among my ancestors yelled for power, Black power, and the walking mass took bolder militant strides towards setting cities to flames. They won fights in their gains, and my people's civil rights remain under siege, under constant siege. Thousands of us make it to the morgue and the boneyard quicker than to the university. If not, those sites, the prison, in line to a pipeline from grade school trouble. I refuse all risk. I want respect, not elimination. As we always have since Jim Crow and before, resistance is the thing to turn to in an era when open hate for different, skin shade is declared the new normal. For defending our right to exist on the streets, we get the name terrorist. Those misinformed assholes just missed the memo. Protesting isn't terrorism, white supremacy is. Let me say that again. Protesting isn't terrorism, white supremacy is. I resist. A hate escaping from under rocks, a hate emboldened from the top. The nationalist and proud White House these past few years, with head and hand and pen and paper and laptop and mic, I move forward towards unity between different colors and nationalities through the written and spoken words, to send hate running until there's no shelter left to hide itself in. My social justice, street warrior dues are paid in full. Now I choose the stage for my resistance exclusively. My soul remembers past fights for equality and respect, the path to department stores, lunch counters, and fair housing didn't clear themselves. My ancestors' struggle also belongs to me.
Impressive.
Soul Memory 2.
You know, D, in this world, There's good, there's bad, there's ugly, as well as indifference. So what do you, D, view as being the role of a poet in modern day society?
To tell the stories that the rest of society has either forgotten, forsaken, or remained ignorant of. That's my role as a poet. Can't speak for the next poet, though.
Now, as a poet, or as poets in general, are we required to write about these issues, or can we just write about rocks and flowers and the ocean and trees and butterflies and caterpillars? Are we required to write about these major heavy things?
I feel that I can. Like I said earlier, I liked Langston Hughes for his diversity in his work, that he wasn't able to express himself in more than just one emotional state or one mood. He was more than able to write about one thing. And I try to inherit that for my own process in writing. I love the rocks and the butterflies and the trees and the flowers and all that. I give great praise to the environment. I've been a city boy my whole life, but whenever I'm in a place that's deep in nature and see all the beautiful things within it, I give great praise to all those corners of creation, from the mountains to the grass and all the flowers blooming from it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there are things in this life that hurt me deeply, or things that I like to see changed or removed from this society as it is in its current condition. So I feel like I have to write about those things, especially when some of those things impact not just the earth, but the animals and human rights in general, not just human rights for Black people like you and me, Dr. Ingram, but human rights for all people.
Beautiful. So when you write, who's in the driver's seat, you or the poem?
I feel at that moment when I'm sitting down with a pen, writing down a poem, at that particular moment, when I'm just coming up with, when the words start to come to me or the image comes to me in my head, that's when the poem starts to take form within me. And then it takes its final form on paper. And then I got to proofread it afterwards. And then I got to take out the parts that don't work and leave behind what's left over as the final formulated piece. And hope against hope that that piece actually reads well and sounds coherent to somebody besides me.
You mentioned editing. There are some who feel as if writing poetry is like a living creature that is free to be changed. You allow it to fly. And there are others who feel that poetry, once you've written a poem, that's it. It cannot be changed. What is your take on the editing process?
Like I said, I usually pick up the piece after I've read it, look over it, take out the pieces that don't work or make the piece seem clunky in the starting stage. And then try to edit it towards something to where whatever's left over will have a much better flow. And usually when I'm sitting down to write anything, I always have it in my mind that I'm going to use this in a performance someday. I plan to do this either on a stage or over Zoom or over Google Meet or whatever.
So they say the poem is published, like in Discovery. You're willing then to go back and change lines, or once it's out there, the poem is done?
I feel like everything that's in this book is pretty much all said and done.
Okay.
It's out there for the ages. I hope that somebody in the future who digs up like long dead things or antiquities will probably find that in a roll and preserve it somehow. But I'm the first one, but I will be the first one to say before that time comes that my own work is garbage compared to say someone who has won a dozen awards and fellowships and memberships to writers groups.
I totally disagree with your view about a person who's won these fellowships and awards. I mean, that's fantastic. I'm not taking anything away from anybody, but that does not mean that their work is more valuable than yours. Think about the number of people that you influence and motivate to think about life in a different way or to renew their views. There's so much, D. I think you're fantastic. Whether you win 100 awards or 1 or none, your work is still monumental to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That does my heart good. Yeah, that I'm able to influence someone else to do what I do.
You touch people with your work. I'm glad that we've had this opportunity to talk because it gives me an opportunity to learn more about you. I'm able to find out more about you as the man and you as the poet. This has been a phenomenal experience for me. Let's imagine for a moment that a poem is like baking a cake. All right. So what do you view as being the ingredients that go into baking, a poem?
The words, of course, and using the different poetic devices that somehow make an average poem work. And I've managed to try to bring in everything into my own work, from alliteration to imagery and consonants. When you use a consonant letter sound and it repeats throughout a sentence or passage, whereas assonance is when you take a vowel sound like A-E-I-O-U-Y and repeat it throughout a phrase or a passage. Mm-hmm. I try to use all the little things that make a poem work.
As I listen to your work, it's very visual. It's almost as if you're framing a photograph.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I want the potential reader or listener that as they're reading my words or hearing my words, that they can actually picture what's going on in a poem inside their heads, like a miniature movie or a miniature video of some kind.
What do you think, based on your lived experience, all the situations that life throws at us sometimes, what do you think that your work conveys about the human condition?
I have but only four in my body of work. There are four messages that I'm willing to convey to my readers and listeners. Give the planet and its creatures the same respect you would want. Think for yourself, act for yourself, and don't believe the hype. The most interesting things and people are found on the outer edges of society, aka the underground. Mm-hmm. And finally, people who claim to serve us don't.
Wow. Excellently phrased.
I had to think long and hard about this before I phrased these.
We've now reached my favorite part of the program. I view it as being a mini poetry lovers concert. This is an opportunity for you, D, to share 3 or 4 of your works back to back without interruption from me. D. Allen, you're on the stage.
Done. And this next poem from Discovery also happens to speak to the subject matter. From pages 56, 58, and 59. This is called Battlefield Charm. They carried her with them on the sides of carrier airplanes, on the front bonnets of jeeps and tanks, even on live bombs intended for communist targets, painted on long for. American GIs carried her with them for good luck surviving combat against Chinese troops up and down the 38th parallel, dissection of Korea into feuding halves, north and south, painted on, longed for. Instruments of warfare bore her likeness, someone who was never a soldier, tucked inside lockers and duffel bags, were color or grayscale totems GIs needed, helping them recall the home front and the females awaiting them on a distant shore, hoping for the conflict to completely end stateside, run into a dead ringer for the red-hot brunette they constantly saw on planes and bombs. In Europe and the Pacific during World War II, Betty Grable's $1 million legs had the soldiers fighting hard. But in the nearly forgotten war in Korea, Miss Betty Mae Page was all the rage. Battlefield Charm. From page 62 and 64, 2 miles, based on actual people and events. Game recognizes game. Ever heard that expression? Game recognizes game. Popular saying used in some Black people's conversations, normally blurted out when someone sees their best ability in another. Example given. Back in the 1950s, a Florida cheesecake model didn't want to limit herself to being before flashing cameras. So she switched positions. The camera was in her hands for a change. The amateur photographer in this tale, let's call her Bunny, was found by her other self, a New York City model visiting Miami on holiday. Let's call that one Betty. Leather corsets, knee-high stiletto heel boots were kept out of those photo shoots. Bunny believed that the female form could stand on its own, and that was no lie, considering the sometimes pinup had Manhattan's reigning pinup Queen Betty to work with, potential bestseller who could flex into any pose in many guises. A housewife, a vixen, a splashing beach bunny, a female Tarzan in leopard skin, a fisherwoman on a boat reeling in her catch in the raw, decorating a small Christmas tree with just a Santa hat and a wink. Game recognizes game. 2 miles. Hollywood Mannequin, Los Angeles, 1945. 20th Century Fox took a chance on a fresh new face visiting from San Francisco, by giving her a screen test on the strength of a few cute photos. For her entrance to big screen immortality, Backlot Studio beauticians hooked up Roy and Edna Page's dreamy-eyed daughter with parted black hair pulled back severely, too much red slathered on her lips, near circus clown quality, eyebrows penciled in to Charlie Chaplin thickness, just like Joan Crawford. Performing hula dances and playing movie star games with the other kids at the orphanage. Staging pretend beauty pageants with her 2 sisters outside their clapboard house in Nashville. Didn't prepare young Betty for cosmetic reconstruction into a Hollywood mannequin whose looks horrified her at first sight, whose face she didn't recognize as hers, whose natural Southern drawl left appalled, ears trained to accept clear, unaccented English. And looking like the scariest actress, on screen and off, didn't win her any studio contracts. Disillusion followed Betty, back to SF. Stayed with her for days. Her dream of the actress's life didn't end there. Hollywood Mannequin. Firebait from pages 76 to 78. Firebait. He was allowed to have his freedom outside prison walls on the condition that he destroy his life's work, end his business of making and selling pics mail order. Such was the deal, the Faustian bargain Irving Klaw made with the federal government, relentless on the hunt for perverts, juvenile delinquents, and menacing reds hiding under people's beds. Glossy monochrome 4x5s, 8x10s, film negatives, harmful matter, disposable bait fed to the fire, roaring in a metal rubbish bin. Underground favorite, top model Betty Page, seductress, saint, naughty, nice. Paradox on spiked heels, under flames, bubbling, melting. Decomposing, beauty in bondage, disappearing, nowhere is searing. It's a fire, Estes Kefauver, Tennessee senator, presidential wannabe, and their Senate subcommittee, built for Pope Irving and his camera-snapping sister, Paula. 3/4 of the photos, the worst of the worst, were ashes. Paula Klaw, fortunately, kept the last fourth, saw future selling potential. Thank goodness for crafty little sisters. Firebait. And this next one is going to switch gears a little bit away from the life of Miss Page to my own. Based on actual events, this is called Cinder Block Wall. 1992, December, age 24. Standing between me and a shitty mic, attached to a stand plugged into a bass amp, was a wall only I saw. Solid as cinder blocks bound together with cement, built from inner fears I'd harbored. What if they hated my voice? What if I get booed at? What if they wanted me away from the mic? What if they said I had no talent? At a friend's birthday party, both of my musician peers, a muscular, braid-headed, black heavy metal guitarist, a tall, long-haired brown punk bassist, had talked me into reciting my newest piece, written over a coffee table by hand, all 3 notebook pages, not quite ready for reading material, bashing from start to finish the brainwashed nature of U.S. voters buying into the 2-party power grab shit show every 4 years. And they wanted me to do it over the mic. A hard-edged, female-led alternative band was on deck to play this house party. My boys wanted me to be the opening act. This was the right moment for my hands to start trembling like 1989 San Francisco. When I stepped close enough to the cinder block wall and parted my lips to speak, masonry went weak at the very sound of me. Splits and fissures began to form. The wall cracked and crumbled before my feet. When the wall finally came down, fear disappeared. And that night, before the mic, before a live audience of freaks, a performance poet was born. Cinder block wall. Rumors from page 87. Rumors. The black-haired former Tennessee tease, flashing country girl smile that could melt a man, and a figure sure to please, left New York City for cold Canada land. So we've been misled. Maybe slinging hash in Texas diner was her plan. Or maybe she married a man royalty bred. Wrong again. It's much more uncouth. She died under fire from mafia lead. Becoming a Christian born again was the only proof. Out of many swirling wild rumors, the cross she wore, Bible she held, gave us sure proof. Rumors. And this one is also going into deeply personal territory for me. From pages 116 to 118 in the book, this is called Fantastique. Fantastique, photo album number 6, featuring Betty Page, image produced by the Claws. Against red-tinted bedroom backdrop, two-tone big boot dominatrix only in pictures, invited viewers to come to her. Seductively shot, magazine cover, date unknown, drew me to her one day. Seductive shot reprinted on a medium black t-shirt hung on a gift shop rack. The moment we met in 1998, the sight of you was enough to start a love affair. No, a harmless crush. Miss Betty, welcome visitor to my nightly dreams. Mainstream America's interest in you began during my toughest unemployment streak, 1992. I slept through most of it. Like Rick Van Winkle, woke up for your revival, arrived late for the party. Miss Betty, camera-ready, gorgeous lady, how did you manage a good little choir girl and a wicked femme fatale living within you? Both roles worked to your advantage. The keys of men's heart were held jangling in your hand. Miss Betty, your copycats came and went, but I knew who the real deal was. Fantastique, French word that best describes you. Lighthearted you, inventive you, sensuous you, forward-thinking you. Fantastique, fits you good and snug as a pair of black leather opera gloves. Fantastique.
All right.
And this next one is also going into deeply personal territory again. This is called Resident, from pages 132 and 133 in the book. Resident. Not a native, but a resident of my corner of East Oakland, where poverty dominates, where broke-on-break crime is as natural as drawing breath into lungs. There's more cars and SUVs broken into by unknown parties than not. More fenced-off pieces of land and liquor stores than there are community centers and decent food shops. The homeless sleep against boarded-up buildings, empty inside as the price of housing continues to soar past the clouds. Drugs and black market guns are always available, have been available. 5 decades of strung out black bodies and black bodies shot from petty disputes write that history. Where the criminal image, the thug agenda is praised, where I fear the enemy, and the enemy is my own. Believe me, I didn't design this madness. I'm not a native, but a resident of my corner of East Oakland, where poverty dominates, but its effects are being relieved. Mutual aid is not a theory here. It's hitting the street running, seeing to a long queue of people, families in need, alleviating hunger, thirst, human health. Mutual aid for the Black takes several forms. Black Cultural Zone, Occur, East Oakland Collective, Homies Empowerment, Poe Magazine. These days, the working class around here are supporting themselves since the city won't. Downtown City Hall sees my place of residence as a blemish on the east side, in need of change. Just remove the Poe from homes, rename the block, welcome richer residents in. Like I said, I didn't design this madness, but as long as I'm here from my little house, I'll document it. I'm not a native, but a resident of my corner of the changing Bay Area. Eastmont, Oakland, California, USA, where I'm from.
Wow.
Resident.
D. Do you think that you were destined to be a poet?
Was I destined to be a poet? I don't know. When I was much younger, I thought because I drew pictures and painted, I was meant to be an artist. Maybe that's still true. These days, however, I tend to tell stories and create pictures using words and phrases, mostly in lyrical verse and blank verse. Sometimes my poems rhyme, sometimes they don't.
What do you think you've learned about yourself as a result of being a poet?
I've learned that I have the power to influence people for the better, hopefully through my work, through this seemingly negative or harmful subject matter, or heavy-handed, and these are words that have been thrown at me by other poets, mind you. By reading through this seemingly negative subject matter that I tend to write about, hopefully people can read through it, and hopefully that will be like a step toward finding a solution for the different problems that plague our greater society and worry us as individuals. I want to make the world a better place, but I want to be remembered for something good.
All right.
Since I don't currently have a family of my own, the usual nuclear family model of wife, kids, pet, I feel like the 9 books that I've written so far and the 73 anthologies, both digital and traditional print, those are my children. That's the legacy I want to leave behind before I expire from this mortal coil that we find ourselves in.
What surprises you most about being a poet?
What surprises me most about being a poet is that poets aren't appreciated or regarded as highly as much as, say, someone who writes a series of history novels or a tell-all memoir book, or someone like J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter fantasy novels, or the Hunger Game novels, or the Maze Runner novels, or the Divergent novels. And all those franchises eventually became these big-time Hollywood blockbuster movie series. Mm-hmm. And what pains me personally as a poet is that poets aren't regarded that highly. We don't get the love that, say, J.K. Rowling gets, or Lee Child, if we're going to talk about mystery authors, or every tell-all memoir book that you could possibly name, from Cicely Tyson's life story to Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Native American singer for that alternative band. We're not regarded as highly as those people, and I like to be able to try to change that, at least during my lifetime.
Where can we purchase your work, D?
There's different websites where a lot of my work, not just individual poems, but my books could be found. And it's real simple. Just go to whatever internet web browser, not web browser, but internet search engine that you normally use, and just type into the search window, D. Allen Poet, D. Allen San Francisco Poet, or D. Allen Oakland Poet. Either way, you're going to get results.
So what's next for you? Where do you go from here creatively?
I plan to put out not just a 10th book, but I've already finished writing an 11th book, and I already have publishers in mind for both of them. In fact, the 10th book is already being prepared in the book production pages with a publisher based in Arkansas called Gnashing Teeth Publishing. And this next upcoming 10th poetry book will be so much different from Discovery, from all the other books that came before it, because it's going to focus on me. It's going to be more personal than a lot of those other books. That's all I could tell you about it right now. The 11th book will be typical D. Allen. It will be mostly political poems, but I will also throw in some personal and miscellaneous pieces about things I like here and there.
Okay.
And I already have the publisher in mind for that one as well. The same people who put out Rusty Gallows, Passages Against Hate, my 6th, Vagabond. I've written something just for them in mind.
We've reached the end of our poetic journey, but I want to thank you. I was sitting here thinking, I cannot think of a better person to help me end this particular iteration of this podcast. You're an impressive poet. You write well-written poetry, but to me, you're even more of an impressive person.
Thank you.
Who has a mission. You talked about the poetic ancestors that you enjoy, such as Langston Hughes, Amiri Baraka, Hakeem Al-Budi, Sonia Sanchez. Yes, Sonia Sanchez.
And Robert Hayden.
Robert Hayden.
Rest in peace. But there are poets among the living that I like as well. There are poets that are currently putting their stuff out there into the world that I happen to enjoy and that I learned from. There's Lantern Carrier from England.
Yes.
Very, very devotional, spiritually centered poet. And he's very eloquent when he performs. I like him. I like another poet from England, a Moroccan descended poet by the name of Miss Nema Chowchun. And she tends to bring a lot of sardonic humor into her personal pieces. There's so many others that I like to list, but and there's Jennifer Noisy, who is the author of her first book, Things, from Florida. And she is so impressive because I like the way she markets herself across the mainstream and all outlets from Amazon to Rakuten, the Japanese Amazon, and Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, etc., etc. And I'd also like to thank Kate for sitting in on this interview. Thank you so much for your patronage.
Still craving poetry? Hundreds of episodes of the Quintessential Listening Poetry online radio and YouTube podcast are available to listen to or download on iTunes, Spotify, and other streaming platforms. To learn more about the popular podcast or how to become a guest, visit www.QLPORYT.com. Till next time, take care and let poetry ring somewhere throughout the land.